Okay. All right. So we're good. Yeah, Lisa, you can come on back. All right, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for kind of waiting. For those of you unaware of who I am, my name is Andrew Davis. I am the 8th District Commissioner here in Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. This is the first meeting of the Land Bank Policy Review Standing Committee. And so we are going to get through as much as we can of the agenda with the time that we have allotted. I'll go ahead and ask for a roll call of the subcommittee members, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Here.
Mr. Davis, we see that Lisa has the focus on Zoom, but we're not able to hear her audio.
You cannot. Okay, I'll go ahead and do the roll call. Commissioner Markley?
Here.
Commissioner McKiernan?
Here.
Commissioner Bynum?
Here.
And Commissioner Ramirez?
Here.
All right, thank you so much. So yeah, this is kind of our first attempt, and do bear with us as we are still getting things organized for this standing committee. I'm going to briefly go over the community engagement piece and what that has looked like. If you all can put that PDF on screen, that would be great. So let's kind of back up and go to really last summer. There was a desire to look at our land bank policy all the way back in June. And Commissioner McKiernan, who chairs the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee, had tasked me with starting this process. Initially, we were going to do some community engagement last summer and got some feedback from some folks saying, hey, we need to slow it down and we need to be a little bit more methodical. And that led to what we have here. I'm going to go through this pretty fast because we will have ample opportunity to go through this. We'll do it at the standing committee level and at the full commission level. But basically, as you all can see, we had a variety of meetings, both at community centers and at the chamber and at the WICO Housing Summit, in which we've engaged folks, 318 total engagements, so total participants in all of those meetings. Some of the commissioners that are a part of this subcommittee led those engagement efforts and got some of the feedback that you all see below. And so when we look at this question of what should the purpose of the land bank be, we see affordable housing, we see to get rid of itself, we see increasing density, gardens, urban farming, local ownership, things of that sort. It is our prerogative to really keep these things in mind as we are making these policy recommendations to the standing committee level. What we do know is that not everything at the unified government is broken. If we can go up just a bit, we were very intentional about asking this question of what do we do well, right, for the land bank. And we found out that it was very accessible and that our process, although not perfect, is much better considering our neighbors throughout the metro area. But we also found out that there is room for improvement. And so one of the things that we heard back was improving communications with our NBRs, improving the coordination between all of the UG departments. In many of those departments, we have a part of this committee, goals and benchmarks to reduce inventory, more participation from the Land Bank Advisory Board, among others, yard extensions, moving land bank to planning. These were some of the things that folks had brought up that we definitely want to consider, and some of these things we already have moved on. And so the last thing I will say here is our most recent engagement this year. You can go all the way down, Lisa. I'm pretty much done. We did an engagement at the Beatrice Lee Community Center. And the reason why we did this was our second time coming was the first engagement just wasn't done well. And we really, considering that community center is located in the Northeast, we wanted to honor the fact that those folks within that area needed to be heard and they deserved a better engagement. And so this was our best, in my opinion, our best engagement out of all six. We had a wide variety of participants. We had different stations that had different ways that folks could engage and add their ideas. Below there, you can see we had a lot of garden and urban farming folks show up, and they let their voices be heard, right? And have their recommendations below. And so you all, this piece is online. You can read through it for yourself. I did a skim of it, but wanted to kind of ground our conversation and say that the work that we are doing is rooted in community engagement. And the conversations that we have, it is my hope that we use this particular guideline from our constituents to inform the conversations that we have and the decisions that we make. Without further ado, I will hand it off to Mr. Hand to talk about policy, strategy, and procedure clarification. Mr. Hand.
Thank you, Commissioner. Gunnar Hand, Director of Planning and Urban Design. Lisa, if you could just pull up the presentation. And while she's doing that, Commissioner, real quick, I couldn't tell, did you already do a brief review of land bank policy update, or did you want to go back to that after my comments?
Nope, let's just go ahead with your piece.
Okay, thank you. So I just have the first couple slides of this presentation, and then I'll hand it off to Mr. Knapp, the land bank manager. Obviously we have a couple of things, as the Commissioner mentioned, we wanted to go over in this presentation. The way that we've designed it is to sort of cut it up into different sections, and then at each of those sections have a policy discussion before we move forward. The way that staff has organized these is the policy conversations will build on one another. So we'll eventually get to some of those sticky issues that we need to get to, but we really need to get through some of the core structural policy, take your temperature on if we like or don't like the way we do things, and then have some conversations. The way we've been describing these is we've done some of the public outreaches. They're not the same meeting. They will build on one another. So if you're interested in land bank policy update conversation, we would recommend you show up to all of them. If you come to just the fourth one, you're going to be pretty lost by the time we get to that fourth one. We'll be that deep into the weeds of the policy itself. But before we get started, Judd, if you could go back one. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Lisa. Do we have the clicker? So I think it's safe to say one of the reasons we are here today is because our current land bank policy acts as three things, not as just the land bank policy. The policy document itself is both policy. It's got a little bit of strategy in there. In my opinion, and we'll talk about this more at each of the policy discussions, it has a lot of procedures. Unlike other ordinances, this policy does not live in our chapters of ordinances. It's a standalone document. So those are two very different ways to write and even at the end of the day, interpret policy. If it's in the chapters, it has a very legalese kind of language to it. It's got a long history of why it's been that way. And we sort of fit that rhythm. This policy document doesn't have those constraints, right? But the problem that you have if you combine all of these things, policy basically is the Board of Commissioners vision, or excuse me, the Land Bank Board of Trustees vision for the land bank. A strategy is how we take the ecosystem of all of these things, be it the policy that you all define for the land bank, the existing area plans, long range plans, corridor plans that we have, all the feedback we've heard, all the institutional knowledge we have. You build all of that together to define how we use all the tools of the unified government to reach that vision towards that policy. And then the procedures are the day-to-day operations that the land bank manager manages as he's going through the approval process or any other kind of structure that we put together. All of that is in the same document right now. And I think it's staff's recommendation that we take a very clear look at how we pull out those procedures. If we want to change a procedure, add a procedure, technically the way this document lays out means we have to have these meetings every time we want to say we want to do something different on how we accept applications, for instance. That is not a policy conversation. That is a procedure conversation that should be we would like the policy to empower staff, i.e. the CAO, and thereby the land bank manager to just kind of execute and figure out those day-to-day things. Putting them all together just kind of further complicates stuff. I was going to say next slide, but I got the thing. So it lands on this slide, and we've seen this slide a couple of times in our presentations. And on the left is generally how many land bank parcels we get in through tax sales, and on the right is how many land bank projects we've completed. Now, the one on the right does not include all the options. For instance, in 2022, I think we had 240 some odd options. Only 48 of those have been executed. And most of those were carryover from 2021, right? Because it takes a year to complete the option and so on and so forth. But the trend here is still the same. This is a good, if you will, apples to apples comparison, which basically says while we are making progress, we are not moving the needle. So the current policy is operating, it's working. People are getting land bank properties, and to some level of success, we are transforming those into development projects. But at the rate that we're doing it, we are not and will never move the needle. So we've had this whole conversation in these public meetings. If you remember, it went from, land bank phase 1 was basically tearing down houses. Land bank phase 2 has created this market where people are now interested in acquiring land bank and develop it. We believe we need a new policy to move into phase 3, which gets us to the point of how are we actually making a difference using land bank as a tool? And that can mean a whole bunch of different things, which we're going to talk about today. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Judd to start our first policy discussion.
Thank you. I'm Judd Knapp. I'm the current land bank manager. First, we're going to talk about options. How we're going to talk about these, I'm going to give you a program summary of where we are today, then go over our current policy, and then our community input, and then finally a policy discussion we could get involved with. First is, how is the program doing? So we've built 6 homes with the option process so far. We have 34 completed options, and what a completed option is, they've gone through the approval process with commission, and they have a building permit, and they provided me proof of funds, and I have transferred the property to them. So we are not in ownership of those 34 completed options right now. We have 446 approved options, so that means that they haven't got a building permit yet. And then canceled options, this number is low. I could go into detail of why that is, but when we first started, my database had I can only have 1 entry per parcel. So when a option was canceled, I kind of blew away all of its information and made it for sale again. But I've changed that since now, so now I can give you a good count of what's canceled. So next, I kind of want to give you a little example of what our current option policy is. If the lot is buildable, the applicant must build on the lot. Then I got a little decision tree that I use to run the land bank. See at the very top, it says first contact, they identified a lot. And then what we do is say, is this lot buildable? Yes or no. If it's yes, I said, is construction planned on that lot? And then if they say yes, I start gathering the information to create the presentation that I present to you. If it's no, I tell them it's a buildable lot, but you can build a 2-car garage. So that's why we have all those 2-car garage applications that come through. If it's not a buildable lot, we're going to jump back up to the top. That is eligible for a yard extension now. There's the yard extension requirements, and if they meet those, I create the presentation and present it to you. The escrow process, I wanted to touch on that one just a little bit. This is when an option is completed. We actually collect $2,000 from the applicant to be returned to them when they finish their final building permit. You may ask, why do we do this? Because we used to have a process where we deeded the property at the very start, and then that deed had clawback provisions in it, and that did not allow, banks did not like that. Banks don't like the way they can loan money and then the government can come take it back, or the city. So I think Wendy Green and I figured out how we could possibly get around this without giving those deed restrictions on that deed. And that's to delay transferring ownership until they have a building permit and have the financing in place. And then we deed it to them without deed restrictions. And then that $2,000 was just an amount that was supposed to be big enough where it wouldn't stop the build, but large enough that people would want to finish the build. So we had here's some community engagement stuff. What does success look like? There's definitely said fewer vacant lots is what success looked like. And then we had this board at our last meeting that said, what development options would you like to do with a land bank lot? You could see that the hold for development, the very first box had 2 people agree with it, that we should hold it for development. Yard extensions had 1 against it. And garages and houses, there was more for than against them. I do have to say that gardens did show up. The people that love gardens wrote gardens in the bottom of this, and we're for that also. Let's go to the next one. So this is our questions that we come up with. Gunnar, were you going to take?
Sure. So as Judd explained, basically, when you come to the land bank, you have 2 options. You either don't get one or you get an option agreement. And you kind of went over why we have that option agreement. I think there's some nuances to the reason why we created it originally, i.e. speculation that will probably shake out in a future policy conversation. So, but absent that, I think we just wanted to start with the first question, which is, do we still like going through this and having option agreements? Do we?
Yeah, and I'll add, many of you are probably looking at this agenda and you're like, what the heck? I thought we were going to be talking about buildable versus unbuildable. We are going to have those discussions at a later date. And so we have not forgotten about it, but we'll probably spend the rest of our time really talking about options and really opening it up. And so if staff is done presenting, we'll just kind of enter into the discussion period. And so, yeah, I would love to hear some thoughts about kind of the process, or if you all have some questions to kind of clarify. But yeah, this is really for us to really engage staff on what's working and what's not. Does anyone have any questions or comments? If not, I have some. Okay, yeah, Commissioner Markley, go for it.
Well, you're welcome to go ahead too, Commissioner, but I was just gonna say, I mean, I think the critical things are, to me, we've got to be able to claw back the property if they're not doing what they're supposed to be. And that's why we sort of initially came up with the procedure that we have here. And I think there's got to be some level of skin in the game. There's got to be something to sort of make somebody commit to this path. So those are sort of my 2 concerns. Now, we could meet those 2 concerns in a variety of different ways, but I think those are the 2 things that kind of governed us way back when Commissioner McKiernan and I were first involved in this process. And I think the same remains true today. We've got to have a way to claw back properties that aren't being treated properly. There's got to be some skin in the game.
Gotcha. Yeah, Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you. What is the land bank option fee for? Is it for when they apply? That's the fee that they use. Okay.
Yep. So I think, again, for us, if we like the option program and how it operates today, or just maybe not how it operates today, but the idea that the option is the mechanism by which we claw back property. It does lead into another question about escrow, but to address your point, we've talked a lot about how we've removed barriers for development, waiving BPU fees, building permit fees, and yet we still have this $100 fee, which again, technically fees need to be approved by the Board of Commissioners. So there's a reason why it's in the policy, but it is technically a procedure, not the policy document here. So to address that, and then we'll figure out how to write it with our legal counsel down the road. But the question is, should we not also just waive this fee too? If we're in the business of waiving all these other fees that are much more expensive than $100, or is that enough of a threshold? As the counterpoint, is $100 enough of the threshold to get the quote skin in the game to even start a land bank? There's that consideration too. You could, if it costs you nothing to apply, there's a world where we get more speculative people running in and just applying because there's nothing but their time that it costs. So there's a back and forth there. I can tell you this much, $100 does not cover Judd's time to process a permit.
I have a question, and maybe some of our veteran commissioners can respond to this. Was there any rhyme or reason regarding the $100 fee? I mean, it's not for cost recovery's sake, it's just not doing it. But was it just skin in the game? Does anybody know kind of the thinking on that? Veteran commissioners, and it's okay if not. I just for staff too. I don't know if anybody knows.
I should know, I should remember better than I do, but I feel like it was a nominal fee to have some skin in the game. And I should know the answer better than I do.
I have an answer, Commissioner. I was the budget analyst for the land bank back when this went in place. And I knew that the land bank was trying to become its own enterprise fund, and it was trying to raise its own money. So the fee was hopefully that the land bank could support itself with its own enterprise fund.
So it was an enterprise fund for the purpose of.
So the land bank could run itself.
Okay.
So it was like a fee that would help with that.
Okay. Offset the cost of staff and everything else.
That is correct.
Do we know how much is currently in that fund right now?
The fund was never created because the land bank never made more money than it cost.
Okay.
So the goal was to get the land bank to be self-supporting, but
Okay, gotcha. Even if we were just to do the math, $100 times 446 applications, that still doesn't cut. Okay, other questions that we have or thoughts?
Staff was torn on this one.
Yeah.
We see it both ways. So any direction you guys have would be important. My own personal opinion is, I guess professional opinion is, this is skin in the game. This will prevent people who aren't real serious about applying for land bank. And as Judd can tell you, we get plenty of those already, even with a $100 threshold of people who come halfway and then never show up again. There's a litany of projects where they've applied for, it's gotten to the point where Judd's gone down his decision tree. He's asking for additional information and they ghost him. I think that would only increase if we have no barrier to entry.
I'm going to agree with that.
Yeah. Let's do Commissioner McKiernan and then Commissioner Markley.
Thank you. I'll agree with what Gunnar just said. I think it's a nominal fee, and I think that it's an earnest fee, if you will. We do have people, and I'm sure you talked to some as well, who in our land bank community meetings, who said that they thought that even a year on an option was too long, that by the time somebody came to get that option, they should be further along in their internal process. Now, I have no problem with the year, but as Gunnar said, I don't think that the $100 is necessarily out of bounds for a little bit of earnest money.
I
Commissioner Markley.
think one thing that may be for a future discussion, we do have people that are applying to get the lot next to them so they can put a garden on it. And for those people, $100 makes sense. We also have developers that are going to build houses on these lots and make a whole lot of money. And $100 really doesn't make sense. They should pay us more. So I don't know at what point we have that discussion and can afford to pay us more. I mean, they are going to use this property for profit rather than as a yard extension. And we've discussed before, do we set aside some of these land bank parcels and say, these are only going to go to developers? You can't put a yard extension on this one because there's a certain value to some piece of property that there might not be to another. So I think that's going further down the road, and that's a more complicated discussion that this committee has to have. But since we're talking about the amount of the fee, I'll say, I think $100 is fine for this discussion today, but I do think there may be a point where we need to have discussions about, are there different tiers of properties and is there a different fee depending on the purpose for which the person's applying?
I agree, and Commissioner McKiernan, I see you. So let's go to you first, but I think as far as some direction for staff, maybe for some research for next meeting, could we look at some other land bank policies and see if they have a fee structure or not? Just to see, I know we have cities like Detroit that we're often compared to within our process. That might be something that we can look at is that fee process universal, $100 across the board, or is it based upon the type of project you want to do or how many acres you get or what have you? Commissioner McKiernan?
I just want to agree with Commissioner Markley on this. If we do decide that we're going to allow land bank lots to go for yard extensions, if we do decide that we're going to allow them to go for community gardens, then I would totally agree that the $100 fee is a little bit out of line. But if somebody's going to come and build a structure on a land bank lot, then in the grand scheme of things, I don't think that fee is out of line.
Commissioner, based on that conversation, would it be okay if staff just took the direction, as you said, that we not only look into it, but recommend a fee structure at the end of this when we get to actually writing the policy? That way we don't necessarily have to revisit it as a specific agenda item for these conversations, but we will address all of these.
Perfect.
It'll come back up as a topic of conversation, but as an agenda item, I think we just put that in a parking lot and come up with the fee structure that we would recommend as a policy moving forward. Again, and this is where we get into fees need to be approved by the board, but how we set those and if those change and who gets what, I think staff can figure that out procedurally.
Yeah. Judd, I do have a question for you, and I know we have some other questions we want to get through. Has the $100 fee ever been a deterrent for folks? I'm thinking of neighborhood groups, nonprofits, folks that may not have, the money. They may be wanting to buy that lot next to them. It's unbuildable. Has that ever been a conversation?
No, it hasn't. No one's complained about it.
Okay. Gotcha. And that's not to say that it couldn't be a barrier for some, but that's where a proposed fee structure could perhaps look at it. The other thing that comes to mind, commissioners, is if, and throughout our feedback sessions with other folks in the community, there was questions about how to make the land bank parcels more accessible. And so this could also be up for conversation of, should we have a residential versus non-residential, a tier, right, along with those fees, right? And if we're even allowed to do that. And so, yeah, you wanted to add something, counsel?
I do. This is Wendy Green, legal. My question is kind of for Judd, because I think we need to make a distinction. We're talking now about yard extensions and gardens, but that's not an option agreement thing.
No.
And so the $100 fee we're talking about is specifically for option agreements.
Agreed.
So that $100 fee does not necessarily apply to yard extensions and gardens.
Okay, gotcha. And thank you for making that distinction. So we would just really be looking at who's looking at the 2-year option and then at some sort of tier based upon square footage or amount of parcels or something to that effect. Awesome. Okay, well, I think we've landed at the very least questions 1 and 2. Let's look at 3 and 4. We talk about this escrow and then enforcing the option agreements. What are our thoughts there? I know for a lot of our community members, this has caused some frustration, right? But wanted to kind of open the floor for staff and for commissioners to really add to this as we think through this.
And if I may, just to start. So if you think about this, they do all the things they need to do to get the option, right? They get a building permit, but they only need to pull a building permit. At the time that they pulled the building permit, they give us $2,000 to hold, which is basically, again, a little bit of buy-in, a little bit of skin in the game on their side. That compels them to then complete their project. They get that $2,000 back only after they've closed their building permit and we have a CO and right, like the building's ready to go, right? That's a loophole. Somebody could come in, get the land bank option, fulfill all the requirements of that option, give you $2,000 and never come back. So now the $1 land bank just cost them $2,000, but they can sit on that because the option has been closed. They've certified that the escrow remains open, but the option closes and the deed transfers hand before that happens or when that happens. It's a loophole. So the question for us is $2,000 too much or too little? Is there a different way we need to think about how we run the escrow program? And again, I think we're getting on the hairy line of procedure versus policy, right? If you want skin in the game and that's the policy direction, and we think escrow is the way to do it, I think procedurally staff needs to figure out how to do it. The policy doesn't need to say anything about the ins and outs of it. The question for the policy is escrow the way to do it?
Commissioner Markley has her hand raised, and then we'll go to you, Commissioner Bynum. Commissioner Markley.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I think again, I'll just bring us back to like, what's the goal here? The goal is for more people to build stuff on their properties faster. And I don't necessarily, the escrow doesn't, I don't know that that's gets us to the goal the way that we want it to. I think we should consider whatever other options we think might be out there. The end goal, though, remains, we want to get people to get that property, move that property, do what they said they were going to do with it, do it fast. And anything we can do to make that happen, I think, is to our advantage.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bynum.
I just needed Gunnar to tell me that again, because I didn't grasp it and I didn't know that was.
So the way that it works is if you do all the requirements that's required of, you're going to build a house on a land bank lot. And you get the option, you go through the process, you get the option agreement. To complete the option agreement, all you need to do is pull a building permit and have a proof of funds. So that the land bank clears the title, you go through the process, you get approved, you show the final requirements to get your deed. You get the deed, and in return for that deed, we take $2,000 and hold it. You have the deed. You're out $2,000, right? But the only thing holding you to actually developing is if that $2,000, I guess, is enough to encourage you to actually build something.
So
That
just
$2,000 is also a barrier to entry for those who don't want to fork over $2,000 when they're trying to.
Sure, but I want to make sure I'm hearing you, because you're saying that the deed is transferred
Yes.
by showing that I have the money and me going and pulling a building permit.
Simply pulling. Now, you've put a lot of money into the game because you've probably gotten architectural plans and to submit as a part of the building permit application. So your skin is, there's more
You've
skin
got
in the
some
game
in the
than
game.
outside. But at the end of the day, you can walk away for $2,000 with the land bank property.
And you're holding title to the
And
property.
there's nothing we can do about it.
Okay.
Go for it. Go for it, Commissioner Reyes.
I'm afraid to ask this question. How often does that happen?
It's happened once.
As
Once only?
one person figured it out, but they haven't done anything with it.
Okay.
So it hasn't happened yet.
'Cause-
There was a failed build in the Douglas Sumner neighborhood group where they came in to build 2 houses. They put the foundations in and kind of walked away because they said the contractor took their money.
Hmm.
But now there's 2 foundations in that yard. And we don't own it. We can't get it back. But we do have $4,000 of their money in our bank account right now.
Which we shouldn't spend, because there's a world where somehow that comes back to life and they build those houses and they come back to us and go, where's our $4,000? Right? That escrow amount should never be thought of as money we can spend elsewhere, right? That's just a hold in a bank account.
This is Wendy Green Legal. I will say that if that situation should occur and they truly don't want to do anything with it, most likely they're going to stop paying the taxes. And I'll see it in a couple of years, a property in a tax sale, and we'll end up starting the whole process over again.
Sorry. In legal's perspective, and that if we don't want to wait until they don't pay the property taxes and it goes through the whole tax sale process, right when this example of the person takes the deed and just does nothing, is there any legal recourse we have or that we can add to the deed or not? I'm not sure if there's anything we can do.
Right. The reason we went to the option agreement to begin with was to get away from the deed restrictions, because banks do not like deed restrictions. They don't want to lend you money and take a lien on a property that has a deed restriction on it. So we wouldn't be able to do a deed restriction if they decide they're not going to do anything and we don't want to wait, we would have to file a lawsuit and try to sue them for breach of the option agreement.
Which would obviously cost a lot more money than the option agreement. Right.
Correct. Potentially, yes. I mean, I get paid either way, but still.
And again, I think the point to make here is it isn't a problem, but it is a loophole. And if we're updating the policy, these are the types of things you want to talk through. If we're fine with it, we're fine with it. If the direction to staff is to figure out how to tighten up that option agreement, and let us go do that homework and do it. If we like it as it is and we don't, one guy figured it out. In fact, Judd and I debated whether we should even bring this up in this meeting because we just blew up our own spot right here. Right? But this is why we have policy discussions in the public forum, right? So I think it is a fact. It could happen. It has happened once. It's not really a problem yet. But again, if we get to this point where we're trying to move the needle and a lot more properties are going out the door, which I think is the overall goal, it could become a problem.
I have a question then. Was there a reason why within the timeline of the process that after, was it a building permit, then that's when they get the deed, not when said project is finished? Is there is there state statutes or anything that, why at that time? Why not until the project is done?
All right, they're all looking at me.
I can help too, Jed, on
All right.
part of it if you want
I
me
got
to.
you. So with why we waited till the last possible second. They got their building permit, they're ready to break ground, and then we deeded it to them. The old process was we deeded it to them right after the commission gave us approval. And that deed restriction was in there if you had to start construction within 180 days or we'll take it back. To answer your question, we'll just go back to this one where we're making the applicant find a builder, get their building permit or plans, estimate costs and get their financing all in line. And that costs some money. That costs what, like 10,000? So, they do have skin in the game by the time they get to the point where we actually deed it to them. And why we deed it to them without a deed restriction is so the banks will loan on that deed.
But is there a reason why we can't sign the option later?
If I can weigh in,
Or-
most
or
likely it's
reasonable.
again for financing purposes. When they get financing to do their actual project, again, these banks aren't going to like the fact that they don't have legal title to the property. We heard that a lot when we first started to talk to some builders just through the rehab program itself. That's why we had to record the actual sale contracts so they could at least show equitable title. So if I remember correctly, that's why we do it that way, is because they're not going to get financing to do these projects without having legal title to the property.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I guess that's the other thing for us to consider as a subcommittee is we have everyone is taking risk here. The UG, and through taxpayers taking a risk, right? This is our land that we are really saying, hey, you can go ahead and we're hoping that you do something productive with. But the applicant is also taking a risk too, right? And then there's the bank, right? If the applicant is not able to finance, they don't just have cash on hand and they're going through some sort of financing or some sort of borrowing or what have you, then there's also risks there as well. Anybody else have any other thoughts on this? Because it looks like this is where we're at. And if there's, you all did blow up your spot, but if there's low risk, it's going to be hard at the very least to justify changing anything, unless there's other thoughts. Commissioner Ramirez.
It seems up until that one example, but again, this being a public meeting, now everyone's going to know the loophole. Clearly it works. The escrow process is working so far. I would say if staff doing procedurally, my opinion, if you can, like, as you said, Gunnar, try to tighten up that loophole just a little bit so it's not as hard or not as attainable.
Yep. I think going back, we'll look we'll look to see if we can make it, I guess maybe more defendable is the best way to describe it or something like
Right,
that.
that's what I was thinking, is just adding a couple provisions maybe to the option agreement itself, where they're made aware that once the property is deeded to them, this agreement is still in effect. And they're bound by the terms which say they're gonna do what they say they're gonna do. And so if they don't, then we could, I mean, we'd still have to take them to court, but at least they've signed off saying they understand that that's what we're gonna do. So yeah, I think there's things that we can add to the option agreement that'll help that out.
And I think it's okay. We'll also explore how other folks do this to see if there is maybe another date in the timeline where we can pass off the deed or whatever and see if there's examples of that. But getting back to one of the original questions about escrow though, is $2,000 too much? Is that a barrier to entry? Again, looking at it from both sides, one from the developer side, but also one from the equity side. If we allow things like, if we have these conversations in the future where we talk about yard extensions and others, do you want a prorated structure like you did for the fee on the escrow?
And I have to add, it did kill one project, the $2,000. Yeah,
That's what they say at least.
but that's just one.
I mean, we can look at it through the equity lens on both sides of the
Sure.
pendulum here if you want, and one, define if 2,000 is too much or not enough. And then maybe think about if it's a house, it's one thing. If it's a garden, it's another thing. If you guys decide to move forward in a more accessible way with gardens, community gardens or whatever,
Sure.
future policy discussion. There's a whole host of other things that I would describe as developable, maybe not buildable, which again is a future policy discussion. That when we think about land bank, I think we appropriately, but also through a lens, think about it only as single family home development, right? That's not true. It's predominantly true, but again, like, is holding $2,000 for the same single family home the same thing for holding $2,000 for a fourplex, an eightplex? It's a different ballgame.
It's also per lot. It's $2,000 per lot. So your eightplex is sitting on a little bigger lot, multiple lots, but we don't determine what size that lot is. I mean, this lot could be huge. We don't,
Mhm.
it's $2,000 per lot, no matter what size the lot is currently.
Oh, you have something, Commissioner Ramirez?
I was commenting to Commissioner Bynum, you've gone through this entire process of planning, costs, financing. I think the 2,000, or if we want to make it more equitable and have a more tiered or however we want to, I think it's at that point a drop in the bucket. You've gone all this way, made all these costs, spent all this money to get the plans, you're financing with the bank, and to just get the property deeded. Yeah, I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure we can make it more equitable, more fair for everybody, depending on what type of property, depending what development, what it is. But I do think I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
The escrow, I don't have a problem.
Okay.
Just making maybe more equitable, more fair in certain situations.
Yeah, I would agree. Maybe instead of per lot, we look at the size of the lot. So if we're talking about acreage, we can also look at the actual application itself. Are we talking about single family? Are we talking about multi-unit housing? Are we talking about a commercial and a giant headquarters? Are we talking about industrial? So something to kind of tier it, or something to say, and it could be a mix of both tiering and per acre. But that could be some of the equity stuff. Can we get back to the questions here? Because I know we are getting to time. So two other questions. Should there be a deadline to sign option agreements? So what is the current process? It's 2 years, but please inform us, Judd.
We currently do not have a deadline.
You do not. Okay.
And after you approve it, then I try to get them to sign. And I do that by emails, and they got to come in and sign the agreement and pay that $100. Some of them just drop off and never talk to me again. And I don't know when I could say, like, you're canceled. So I think there should be a timeline.
And again, we're tracking that fine line between policy and procedure. But because it's unspoken, staff's recommendation would be to give us direction, but have that be a procedure, not a policy. Right? Like, or if you wanted it to be included because you think it's important, the policy would be something like, there is a deadline to be determined by the land bank manager.
Sure.
At the discretion of the land bank manager or whatever.
Yeah, Commissioner Bynum.
I think my brain died during COVID. I thought the policy was we give you the option, you come through neighborhood and community development, the option is granted, and you have a year to start your building process. And what is the difference between that and the signing of the option agreement?
It's my understanding that when they sign the agreement, that's the agreement and the year starts from that day.
Year starts not from the day we said yes, but from the day you returned and signed the option, Okay, so the years after you sign, and what you're saying is that even after we go through the process of voting to give these properties to these people, we may never see them again. And now we've got dozens of property and land bank option limbo.
That is correct. That's why I kind of need a deadline. Or does it start when commission approves it? Does the year start from that
I
day?
don't know why you wouldn't put a signature on the application, but I know they signed the application.
Yeah.
So go
Legal.
ahead.
Yeah, well, legally, they're not bound by any agreement until they sign it. And the land bank cannot legally give them an agreement until the land bank board of trustees approves it. Because again, they have to approve all property going in and all property going out. So the way it is now, the land bank, the board of trustees just approves the option agreement, then we don't have to come back and get approval again to then sign the deed.
But why
Yeah,
can't the application say, should I be approved by the board of trustees for this property? I agree to.
Because that's two different agreements. That's the applicant, they're signing an application. They're not signing an option agreement yet. There's still two different things, and we can't make them be bound by the option agreement that they haven't signed yet, just because they signed their application fee. To me, I don't think that binds us as well as if when we have them sign the actual option agreement.
And I would say, as part of skin in the game and keeping the project moving, right? There's a rhythm to it, right? So as an example, today, you could get approved. And let's say that your financing actually isn't going to come in for another 6 months. You could just not return Judd's calls for 6 months and then show up when you're actually ready and say, I'm ready to go. And they've self-extended the deadline, right?
Right.
Okay, so maybe
about it.
maybe I think there might be competition for this parcel, so I come in and get it.
I think we could solve that by putting in the application itself that they are agreeing that within maybe 30 days, 45 days, whichever timeframe you all deem appropriate, they are agreeing that they will come in and sign the option agreement. And then if they do not, the option agreement lapses.
And if I sign the option agreement and I'm aware that it might be 6 months before I would have financing, and then maybe my financing falls through. I mean, I can just say it didn't work. I can't do this, in which case there's the clawback that already exists. Am I missing something here?
No, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, if they find out before that year's up that it's just not going to be possible, they could always come back and tell us, no, I'm not going to be able to do this. I want to rescind the agreement. And since we still have title to the property, there'd be no court action that would be needed for that.
Yeah, I think we just want to make sure that you understand how all this works out on the ins and outs, right? Because again, some of this is procedure, but at the same time, we want to make sure that in the spirit of moving things along, that if someone doesn't come by a date certain or at the land bank manager's discretion, however if you want us to write specifically this into the policy, that's how I would write it, would be my recommendation. Because it can change and things can change and each project is a little different, right? And if they can prove certain things and you know what I mean? Like there's always an excuse, but sometimes those excuses are valid and should be considered. But right now, like, because we have no direction, we're just sort of like, well, let's throw it back into the land bank. Now, I think that's the right thing to do, but again, in the spirit of tightening up the policy, understanding how we do these things, taking things out of what should be in the policy and putting them into the discretion of the land bank manager. We just want to make sure we're having all these conversations as we move through all of this stuff, and we'll get to everything eventually.
Yeah, I think I know we are getting close to time. So committee members, tell me if I'm hearing this correctly. I'm good with giving staff direction for a 45-day after the Land Bank Board of Trustees has approved it, put it in the application, and you have 45 days to sign the option. How does that sound for everybody else?
It sounds okay. I guess what's making me think about is that I appreciate the conversation because I want us, the policy side, to be mindful of the processes we're creating for staff. And this is coming up for me a lot in some of the things that I'm engaged in. And so at the same time, kind of looking ahead to item 5, I do want your processes and procedures to be rooted in policy.
Mhm.
I think I want that in general. But it's important for you all to make sure you communicate to us, okay, but if you do that, Gunner, I need 5 more people, I need X number of resources, governing body, in order for me to carry out all this process you've just created for me to do.
Oh, absolutely, Commissioner. One of the things that we will discuss, it's not on here, we're really getting to the meat of potatoes for community engagement, but we will discuss staffing and resources because it just doesn't make sense to create more work. But if we're good with the 45-day part, then that can come back at the end for recommendation. We are at our time, and so I want to be very, very mindful. I do see folks online that do have their hands up. We do not have any particular period for public comment during this time. We are going to explore some other options. And then, of course, this will be discussed by the Standing Committee for Community Development. It'll also be discussed at full commission, by which the public could produce comment as well. And so thank you all for watching. Our next meeting is Thursday, March 23rd at 3:30. Will be hybrid. I promise y'all we will get the tech and IT and everything figured out. We'll also get the agenda figured out. We will resume, just so staff is aware, question 5 on the option discussion. And so that will be kind of the first thing that we go after. And then we'll move on to the buildable versus unbuildable. We might be able to make some progress on yard extensions as well.
Commissioner,
Yes.
would it be okay for me to suggest that people watching that have their hands up, if there's a comment or question, they should send those to you?
Yes. If you do have any, I just wanted to make them aware
Okay.
that the opportunity by which they can make their voices be
Oh,
heard.
okay.
If you do have any question or anything, you could send it to my email, which is adavis@kck.org. And I will go ahead and send it out to the subcommittee members so we can consider it. But just wanted to make folks aware in case they wanted to come and use the microphone as well. Commissioner McKiernan, did you have something?
I was just going to say that I have trapped the one comment from the chat and I have already sent it to you.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, go ahead and send them to me or send it to the clerk's office. However, I know folks, they know how to get in contact with us, but we'll definitely make our emails aware. Anything else we should know, staff? Just a quick recap: $100 fees. We're going to look at tiers for the escrow. We're going to look at tiers, and then 45-day a deadline for the option agreement to be signed. That is the progress of this meeting. All right.
Mhm.
All right. We are adjourned. Thank y'all.